Hi, and welcome to week 11, the elementary science classroom. This week, you're going to read chapter 9 in your textbook, which is called the elementary science classroom. It goes over a lot of really great stuff for you to think about as you get ready to have your own classroom, some key things that you need to really make decisions about and be comfortable speaking to as you go for job interviews, as you talk to parents, as you talk to students, and as you think about setting up and planning each year um, for your classroom. So you're going to watch a video. Your book covers a lot of stuff in that chapter. One of the things it talks about is outdoor science and including outdoor activities in your classroom. And so there's a video that I'll ask you to watch about that and think about in the area where you want to be teaching in a perfect world, where you'll get your job, um, where what types of outdoor activities could you do there? The dichotomous key video you'll watch is about plants, but in Montana we have the opportunity to do a lot of outdoor science that isn't just looking at plants. So think about the types of science that surround the area where you might teach. Your main activity for this week is to rewrite that elementary science education philosophy. The reading that you do in chapter 9 will help to inform those thoughts. But additionally, we've covered a lot of things during the year. I will say that this course was founded on a constructivist approach to science instruction. And as I talk through this video about what I expect from your final version of your elementary science education philosophy, it'll be really clear that I do expect to see some constructivist themes coming through, some student-centered learning type of language. If you really aren't comfortable with constructivist themes or student-centered learning, please feel free to send me an email and kind of check out how you might revise that to reflect the philosophy that you do embrace. I don't want to say that everybody has to believe that student-centered learning is the way to go. However, that has been the tone of this class. So that said, the main guiding question for this week, as you do your reading, as you watch the video, and as you rewrite that philosophy, I want you to think about answering this question. What do you want your kids to experience? You want them to experience learning content. You want them to experience having some hands-on opportunities to engage in science practices and science processes? Do you want your students to experience reading and writing in and about science? Do you want your kids to experience some broader, big picture learning things that are tied to science? What is it that you really want your kids to get? I know for myself, it's always been a balance between wanting, having some specific pieces of content that I think are fundamental to whether it's teaching science or teaching pre-service teachers or teaching in-service teachers through the day job that I do as the science coordinator for the state. Kind of no matter which things it is that I'm teaching, there's always usually some fundamental piece of content that I think is just really important to get across, really important for people to have a deep understanding of. And the other thing I always want students to experience is the opportunity to think for themselves and to make their own decisions about whatever it is that we're learning. I really think that ownership of your knowledge is an important thing. And so if I were answering these questions, everything that I would say about my philosophy of science education would come back to those two things, that yes, there are key pieces of science content that we need to know, and that yes, there are some key experiences that we need to have as learners so that we can have ownership of that. But if you asked me to say what's the one thing that's most important, I would probably talk about the experience of being scientists. And when I'm teaching teachers, the experience of being a teacher, uncovering for yourself what you're going to experience. So as you think about writing your science philosophy statement, I want you to be really clear for yourself about what your first priority is. It's great to be able to list some other priorities, just like I just said. My first priority is to give people the experience with the kind of first person experience with doing science or being a teacher. And that secondary to that are those fundamental pieces of content knowledge and those experiences of owning their own learning. I want you to think about your very top goals and then what other related goals you might have. In essence, when we do this, we're trying to go through a backwards planning process so that we can be sure that everything that we're doing as teachers is leading to that end goal that we have of what we want the kids to experience. So as you rewrite your science philosophy, I'm going to ask you to put it into 3 sections. When you did it in week 4, um, I posted for you a whole list of questions from your book, and those questions that I posted you could address or not address, however many of them you wanted. I've taken those and restructured them into 3 um, groupings, and you need to make a statement on each of these groupings as part of your philosophy. I didn't do this the first time because we hadn't covered enough material for you necessarily to really address all of these things. So the first grouping is the idea of a student-centered science classroom. So you need to be able to articulate your philosophy of teaching and the elementary science in terms of what it means to have this student-centered science classroom. In that sentence or paragraph that you write, you're going to need to address at some point each of these 5 things. In that classroom, what's the teacher's role? What's the student's role? Really be able to differentiate between those two. And then how is it that having those roles allows students to get involved in their own learning? When students have those roles, when they're in this student-centered classroom, how do they show their achievement? And then how does this impact their ability to learn to value science? Okay, so again, you're writing your own philosophy, your own statement. This is something that you can give to a principal when you're interviewing. You can give it to parents, students, anyone about really what does it mean to you to have a student-centered science classroom and what's that going to look like in terms of these 5 things. The next section you're going to write is going to be titled Students as Scientists. In this section, you're going to address 7 things. It may be that this breaks out into 2 separate paragraphs. It may be that it's all one. You know, how you would make sure you address all these things is up to you. Again, these are the same questions that you had in week 4. So you're going to talk about what the role of hands-on activities are and what the role of scientific processes are. How are you going to make sure students are safe? What types of materials and equipment will be used? How will you use the outdoors in science? What types of field trips or special activities will you do? And how will text be used in your class? And when we get to that last one, how will text be used, I want you to remember we had a whole section on how reading and writing are part of what scientists do. And so as we think about students as scientists, you know, it's pretty easy to think about students as scientists and think about them doing hands-on activities and then, you know, being safe in that. But I want you to also think about students as scientists in terms of that reading and writing piece and being able to address that. Using the outdoors and the field trips are things that are addressed specifically this week, and I want you to kind of add those questions in to your statement because I think that those are really important things to be able to address as you think about how you're going to provide those opportunities for students to be scientists. And then your last statement will be titled Our Focus this year, and in that you'll put the goals and outcomes of your science program and what content will be taught this year. Now, a lot of you don't know what content you'll be teaching because you'll find that out when you get a job. So you can put in some filler pieces of content or a statement about, you know, kind of one piece of content that you would hope to teach, however you want to deal with that. When you do get a job, what my goal in leaving this in here for you, even though it's something that's hard to address right now, and that's why when I call this a final, it's, you know, not totally final, is that when you do get a job, you would be able to use the rest of this and just put in the content of science that you'll be covering. There's some schools that try to cover everything every year, some that break it down and do just a few each year. And depending on how far you are along in your program, you know, we may or may not have adopted new science standards for our state, and that would affect what content you might be covering. So this is definitely as you address the content itself. But the goals and outcomes of the science program, you know, content might be one part of that, but what are the other goals and outcomes that you have? That's the whole presentation for this week. I'm not going to rehash all the different things that are in your book. Your book does a great job addressing kind of these small pieces, these kind of tying together these pieces that are relevant to the classroom, like how to set up your classroom, stuff like that. The 4 things that you're going to put into the forum, one is the final version of your elementary science education philosophy with those 3 sectioned statements. In week 4, I gave you a word goal to shoot for. I'm not going to give you a word goal this time, but I'm going to say you probably wouldn't want it to be too long. You want people to be willing to read it or hear it as you go for interviews and talk to parents and stuff like that. The next question, your book discusses parent involvement. As you reflect on the material your book presents, what are 2 things you want to do to involve parents in your science classroom? Be really specific about what you'll do and explain why you think this is important. Your book covers a whole range of types of things um, in terms of involving parents through things that are sent home, involving parents by bringing them in during the day, after school. There's a bunch of different things. And so what do you want to do and why? Why did you pick that? Um, the next thing, this week's chapter discusses field trips, outdoor classrooms, and non-traditional science settings. What do you remember from your time in school about these activities, and how do you want to include them in your classroom? And then tell me why. I think that depending on our own experience with these things, we really can have different views on how we want to include them. And so the reason I'm asking this question in the forum is I really hope that you can read each other's experiences and each other's thoughts about including this, so that those of you who had really positive experiences maybe can hear some part of the frustration that people might have with when it went wrong and what they want to do. That'll help to inform you to learn from others' mistakes. And that those of you who may not have had positive experiences in school with these things can hear from those that did what was really wonderful, and maybe that can help you a little bit to be inspired to include these things. And then the last one, you'll watch the video about the dichotomous keys, and I want you to think about what types of outdoor science activities might be possible where you hope to teach, and kind of make a little list of those things. That'll really help you out in the long run. When you are in a classroom, you'll kind of have an existing brainstormed list of the types of things that you might want to do. This week, you'll have your assignment due. You'll have your initial post due on Thursday like normal, and then by Sunday you'll need to post your responses like normal. The next week we're taking a week off from content for Thanksgiving. I really hope and plan to have all of your lesson plans graded and returned to you by the Sunday before Thanksgiving. I do have some major work commitments this week, which may cut into my ability to get them all graded in time, but I will do my best to get them back to you right away. And we will resume with our last week of content the week after Thanksgiving. Also, I will be posting a review guide slash study guide for the final. We do have a final exam. It will be on the computer, so it is open book, but I'll be posting a review guide for you to make sure that you've taken the opportunity to go over all the things that might be covered. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me, and have a fantastic holiday.